world of global supply chain, covering topics such as automation, innovation, unique identity, and more. I'm your co-host, Reed.
And I'm Liz.
And welcome to the show. So Liz, how many Amazon packages have you received today?
I don't have any coming today, but tomorrow there's 2 coming.
Yeah, I don't really have any that come, but my wife has a bunch because she runs our household, and it's just, to me, it feels like it's every day. And then every now and then she goes, this is the one for you. But today we're going to be talking about Amazon, and we're lucky enough to have a really special guest, Shannon Roddy, who's an Amazon expert, speaker, and founder of the Marketplace Seller courses. And like Amazon or not, Amazon is going to impact your business. And I heard Shannon say that. And so we're going to jump right into it and start talking about this. So Shannon, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Reed. I appreciate it. Excited to be on with you and Liz.
Yeah, there's so much we need to talk about. But before we get into that, can you just ground us here a little bit? Amazon is so big, but how do you play all of this? I mean, you're quote unquote the Amazon expert, or one of quote unquote the Amazon expert. How do you play in this Amazon world?
Yeah, well, I definitely won't claim the sole Amazon expert, but I have been doing it a long time. And I play in the education space primarily. And so I offer online courses and coaching and then consulting. And so obviously those are different tiers for different levels of engagement. So I offer Amazon courses, what I call the Amazon Brand Success Academy, for any brand, whether it's a sole prop inventor to a large multinational corporation that wants to get a hold of and learn how to leverage Amazon. And obviously we'll talk about the nuts and bolts of what that looks like later on. And then I also offer on-demand coaching for companies who says, you know what, we just have some questions about Amazon. We want to help us understand our approach to Amazon, help us solve some of these issues, do an account audit if they're already selling. And then I work hands-on with a handful of consulting clients where I'm in their account every day doing the work. And that's what keeps my ear to the ground and helps me stay up to date with all of the many changes that Amazon makes on what feels like a daily basis.
So how did you get started in this? Were you an Amazon seller to begin with, or were you working for Amazon? How did this all come about?
Yeah, so I started about 10 years ago. My wife and I actually had lived in Africa, and you can see Old Doña Longai in Kenya behind me, about an hour and a half from where we lived. And when I got back, I had developed a product before we had left and moved over. And my one goal coming back to the States was I want to get it on Amazon. I really didn't understand the platform, but I was like, I know that's probably the best place to sell it, right? I had a website which nobody visited, but I knew Amazon had traffic. And so I kind of made all the mistakes. Number one rookie mistake, I bought a resold PC code. We'll talk about that more as well. Made up a SKU because I didn't even know what a SKU should be. Got my product up and lost money the first year just from fees and overhead and product development. Made a little money the second year, and then discovered the power of SEO keyword research and increased sales by 1,500% the third year.
Wow.
And it just continued to increase year over year. So that's kind of how I got started from the Amazon side. But where I actually learned Amazon, where I sort of went to the school of hard knocks, so to speak, was my best friend Eric Koymans does e-commerce. And as a consultant and contractor working for him and his company Harnessing Strengths, he brought in a company that was selling on Amazon, had a lot of issues, and said, you need to go figure these out. And I said, Eric, it's way too overwhelming. I mean, this is before there's any information online about Amazon whatsoever. And he said, we can't. The people that you have to hire for this are way too expensive. So you just go figure it out. And fortunately, I did. I spent hours on hold with seller support and just struggled through, but learned a couple things, wrote an article about it. And a couple months later, a company reached out to me from, I think, the UK and said, hey, we're having the same problem that you mentioned in your article. Can you help us as well? And it just snowballed. I would learn more. I would post another article. And basically through conversations with a friend and a colleague, realized Amazon is going to be the thing, right? I can do web design. I'm a decent WordPress web designer, but I think I'm better at Amazon. And more importantly, I can explain Amazon better than I feel like anybody else can. And that was kind of sort of my niche, was I think I can educate brands about Amazon, how to leverage it, how it works, how to utilize it, and most importantly, Reed, how to think about Amazon. And so Out of that evolved Marketplace Seller Courses and the Amazon Brand Success Academy. And the rest, as they say, is history.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah, it's really cool. And one of the questions I had just from some of what you just said, when you're talking about the sellers, I know you said brands, and when I think brands, I think brands. Are these sellers mostly small business? Are they big business? Is it a combination?
It runs the complete gamut. And let me break down a high level aspect of Amazon. So Amazon has two portals, essentially, if you will, two platforms. The first one is called Vendor Central, or 1P, or first party. That's where Amazon acts as a wholesale and will purchase products from companies in bulk and then resell. And we know that a product is being sold through vendor when it says ships from and sold by Amazon. So that means it was vendor. They purchased in bulk from the brand. Seller Central is known as 3P, or the third party platform, where a company essentially signs up to utilize and leverage the platform, but it will say sold by the brand name, the company name, and oftentimes fulfilled by Amazon. So Amazon's fulfillment services that they have built out, their 100+ warehouses. I mean, it's now end-to-end integration. When a company, when somebody drops off an Amazon package, it's an Amazon employee in an Amazon delivery truck. They're going to have Amazon, scooters at some point, I'm sure. So their fulfillment.
And it's amazing to me how fast that transition happened. Like, we were all used to getting it from, the Postal Service, and then sometimes it came from FedEx, and sometimes it came from UPS, and then all of a sudden it was like overnight, like boom, everything is like there's a third truck driving through the neighborhood.
And what's fascinating is, even though it felt like overnight, it's been in development for years. I mean, you think about like Ford Motor Company, right? Every time they faced an inefficiency, they just bought that industry out. They were having trouble. The wood supply was too expensive, so they bought the lumber mills. The wool was too expensive, so they bought all the farms that raised the sheep. I mean, they were sick and tired of the trains always being slow, so they bought the trains. I mean, you just think about end-to-end integration is the same thing that Apple did. It's the same thing that Ford Motor Company did, and it's the same thing that Amazon's doing. If done well, it gives the best end user customer experience because it's seamless. And the same software that is orchestrating when I place an order, exactly what fulfillment center that order should come from, it is literally tracking that all the way to the point where it lands on my doorstep. And that's the power of Amazon. I mean, that's where Amazon, even if other companies can do e-commerce better, it's going to take decades for somebody to build an equivalent or even superior fulfillment and distribution model.
So are you, go ahead, Liz.
Well, I just, what you just said is uber complicated, right? And if you've got a small business that's just getting started, and I know that this is part of what you do, and they're like, oh my gosh, do I go to Vendor Central? Do I go to the seller portal? Obviously, they probably go to seller because they're smaller. Is there something that they have to keep in mind too? Like, if they don't have a U, right, are they like floundering? Is there a way that a small person,
Yeah, you're floundering. I mean, there's no question. Yeah. So every company is in one of three situations, regardless of size. And again, sole prop inventor to a multinational company. They want to do it themselves. They want to do it with help, or they want someone else to do it for them. So you can have an inventor with a little bit of cash, and they say, I just want somebody else to do it for me. Mm-hmm. But you could also have a global brand that says, yeah, we just have this agency do it for us, or vice versa. We want to do it in-house. I do the education piece. So regardless of where they are, if they say we want to do it ourselves or do it with help, we offer courses and coaching that allow them to do it. So I work with inventors. I love working with inventors because I'm one myself. Like I love creating products, and I love the startup and the entrepreneur hustle. And so for me, there's an element where I support companies that are one person that developed a product that they loved and probably that they needed. And so it's like, I just developed this for me and then realized other people wanted it too, that are starting off doing $1,000 a month on Amazon, $500 a month when they just get started. But I'm also working with global companies that are just starting to get, rolling on Amazon, doing 125, 150,000 a month. And some companies go up and down from there. So regardless of the size, it's more about the fact that Amazon is so insanely complicated. Mm-hmm. And people always ask, Shannon, what's the one thing? What's the one thing? What's the silver bullet? What's the one thing I need to do to be successful on Amazon? And if you've listened to other podcasts, you've heard this before, but there is no silver bullet on Amazon. It's doing 128 things right. That is a lot. Like, keep this in mind. Amazon is the most sophisticated, the most complex, and the most competitive e-commerce platform in the world. So if you think that you're going to sort of stumble upon this, watch a couple of videos and like figure it out by yourself, like on YouTube kind of thing, you're in for a really, really bumpy ride.
Are you saying that the last 3 hours I spent this weekend watching YouTube videos on how to do FBA, it's not going to work for me?
Yeah, the biggest challenge is how fast Amazon changes. And so there's a lot of videos out there, and anybody who has a YouTube channel will tell you they don't want to take a successful video down with a lot of likes and a lot of shares and comments, because that's what gets them their momentum. That's what gets them their traffic. Well, that video could be 6 months out of date. And the second Amazon makes a policy change, now all of a sudden you're following a video and you're out of policy. Amazon makes a change, and now all of a sudden that's no longer a best practice or no longer a good idea.
So you actually just transitioned right into my next question here. We're not going to have enough time today. Let's just say, I mean, the fact that you brought up Ford Motor Company and how Amazon is doing things similar. And a little fact for you all, maybe you know, maybe you don't know, but the Kingsford barbecue baguettes, that we all, when we put the fire lighter fluid on and make our old barbecue grills, that's actually from Ford, because when they bought the wood, they made it out of the ashes. And, Henry Ford was just, where can we make money? Where can we make money? We don't throw anything away. So that was a whole business that his brother took over and ran with. Very interesting. So you talked about policy changes. So the pandemic has forced e-commerce to explode, right? And we're all thankful for the silver linings that are happening, because if this pandemic happened in the 1980s, we talked about this on another episode, we'd probably be all sitting in a Great Depression right now. But we're not. I mean, we're feeling problems and pains. Sure. But what were some policy changes that happened because of this? I mean, you said 6 months. 6 months to me, it's like I'm just kind of getting my feet underneath me, and then it's changing again. So it sounds like I need to be agile and nimble. But what are some of the big impacts that you've seen? What are some of the policy changes and other things?
So there's a couple cycles that we see, and there's policy changes and then there's platform changes. So Amazon can update the user interface, they can update the algorithm, or they can update their policy. From a policy standpoint, either you have like an advocacy group, or you have like, a legal or political, pressure on Amazon. And this happened with things like pesticides. They found people were selling pesticides on Amazon. You're not supposed to. Well, Amazon just rolled it out and said, okay, we're going to flag any product that has the word insecticide or, antibacterial, and just flag it as a pesticide. And now as a seller, you have to go fight to get Amazon to take that off if it's not actually applicable. And so what we see is, on one hand, you sort of see Amazon make changes from sort of a political or legal, stance. On the other side, because it's the most competitive platform, you see sellers take unethical means to try to game the system. And one of the ways, if you go back like 3, 4, 5 years, it used to be that you could give away a product in exchange for a review. And that's great to get a handful of reviews. If I say, I'm going to give these away to people in my neighborhood, say, hey, can you go on Amazon, review the product? And all you have to put in the review is, I received this product in exchange, for an honest review. Okay. They didn't count on people giving away 10,000 products or 5,000 products or 1,000 products and getting 1,000 reviews overnight. And so they had to change the policy and say, okay, now you can't give a product away in exchange. And so you have this system where, on one hand, you've got all of these sellers who are trying to find ways to subvert the system. And as they, find and exploit loopholes or areas that Amazon hasn't figured out yet, Amazon then cracks down and creates platform updates and policy updates to attempt to squelch those. The problem is it then makes it more difficult for every other seller who's doing things, above the line from a white hat perspective. It just makes more complicated to do your daily job. And I'll give you a perfect example. There's a great product of a client called Cocoa Lasses, Andrea Peterson, right? And so she created this amazing product. It's made out of cocoa and blackstrap lasses. I sent some to my parents in Wisconsin, And my mom loved it. And so she bought another bottle, and she told me the next, she goes, I went and reviewed it on Amazon. I said, no, Mom, you can't review it on Amazon because I extended my Prime membership benefits to your account, and I logged in from my IP address to her account. Amazon's going to flag that. You can't do it. I said, jump on and delete it before Amazon flags it, because that'll happen for one.
Major domino effect here that was not intended.
Didn't know, didn't think about it. My mom's just giving a sweet, honest review, and you have to go and intentionally tell your friends and family, as much as I love you and as much as I want you to, you can't review my products on Amazon. So we see those two sort of aspects of platform update and algorithm update. But Amazon's also just making changes, for the user interface, and advertising right now is obviously just huge. It's just massive for Amazon. More and more of their revenue is going to come from advertising, because if you think about two brands competing for the same keywords, the cost per click goes higher and higher, and Amazon's the only one making more money. Essentially is what it comes down to at the end of the day. And both of the brands, have more and more challenging margin.
Yeah, so let me just double back on that one here. Is why are some brands leaving Amazon? We saw some of these in the news that are just making bold statements like we're not selling on Amazon anymore.
I think there's a lot of reasons. One is the complexity, and even why brands fail selling on Amazon. So on one hand, you could say, "Hey, I intentionally left." In other hands, you could say, "We failed out of Amazon." Like
That's a good point.
And it's because they didn't know what they didn't know. Of those 128 things, they knew 5 or 7, and they didn't realize that there was all these other elements that they needed to proactively be doing or not doing. The other big mistake that companies make is they think of Amazon just like any other platform. They're like, oh, it's just another e-commerce channel, and so we're just going to take the product titles from our website and throw them on Amazon, and we're going to kind of do the same strategy with images or sort of our bullet points. It will not work. You have to be super diligent. I mean, I did a LinkedIn post a week ago about title optimization. You've got to add your brand name. You've got to add your most highly searched relevant SEO keyword phrase. You've got to include your unique value propositions, and it has to be readable for customers, but it also has to include the tangential keywords for the Amazon A9 algorithm so it discovers your product and know what it is. Plus, you have to include the product specifications like the color and the size, and you have to do that without violating Amazon policy while staying within Amazon's 200 character limit. Like, that's way more complex than majority of brands ever come to the table with. And I qualify a brand as any company that has a trademark, has an e-commerce website, and social media presence, And so if you've got a unique product that you've branded, your brand, and it doesn't matter if you've got 2 employees or 200, both of those technically qualify as a brand. So that's one side of why companies like sort of fail and hit the wall before they get started. On the other side, companies can leave Amazon because it is so complicated, because it's frustrating. We have companies that Amazon just restricted their listings or suppressed their listings, and they've been appealing them for months in some cases to try to get them reinstated. They don't know why. They send an email. Amazon sends a template email. Please send us this information. They send them that exact information. They get the same template email back. It's very frustrating. The other side of it is the level of competition where companies just say, we're not profitable. We can't be profitable on the platform the way it's currently structured, And especially when you see ethical challenges where you feel like we launch a product and the next thing you know, we've got 15 knockoffs, we've got counterfeiters, we've got unauthorized resellers, and Amazon makes it easy. And while Amazon has the best interest of the customer in mind, it's challenging to also keep the best interests of every individual brand in mind at the same level of priority. It's nearly impossible to do. So Amazon is the most consumer-centric company in the world. By default, it means it's not the most seller-centric, and that's a tension that they're going to have to manage for the duration of the company.
Oh, wow. Yeah, you make great points.
Yeah. I mean, we've worked at GS1 US with brands, small, right? And huge brands. Yeah. And when I think of the bigger ones, they've been so focused on the physical world. How do I get my product into a brick and mortar grocery store, convenience store, or even a restaurant? And so now they're wanting to get their products potentially onto Amazon and they might have like this one person, right, who's responsible for e-commerce for this major global brand.
Yeah.
Are they destined to fail? I mean, or is it like figuring out those 128 things that don't work for the normal grocery store down the street, but only can work special for Amazon?
They're destined to struggle. I mean, for sure. Right. And that's why I have companies, like I said, and this is the amazing thing, that both of you can understand is whether it's a company, and I've got a woman who sells a product for potty training. It's called Tot on the Pot. It's super cute and it works, and it's like, she's got this amazing product. The listing optimization that she needs to do, the advertising strategy, the branding, the videos, all those things is exactly the same for a multinational corporation for their saying, for maybe they've got a potty training seat, toilet seat for a kid. It's the same. And that's why you have private labels that have 10 employees operating out of a garage, beating out global companies for the number one spot on Amazon because they figured out how to play the Amazon game better. And this is very high level, but this is actually what I consider success on Amazon, is the ability to organically rank for your product's most highly searched relevant keyword phrase, right? And that's the gold mine, Reed. That's where the money is. It's like, 65% of all product searches start on Amazon, even if they're buying in retail or another e-commerce website. And so it's a search engine. I tell companies it is a search engine first. Amazon is a branding platform before it's an e-commerce platform. And if you think of it as anything less, you're destined to fail because you didn't think of it in the right way.
It's almost like you have to have that lens first. Before you start anything, you have to have an Amazon lens because it's different.
I've had companies completely pivot their approach based on a 1-hour coaching call with me. Like, okay, we're getting ready to launch in the US, launch on .com, because I work with tons of international companies, a lot of New Zealand companies, companies from the UK, and vice versa, US companies selling on other Amazon marketplaces. But, they'll sort of have their strategy in mind. Oh, we're thinking about doing this. And it's like, don't do that. Don't do that. This won't work. You have to do this. And it's sort of like this mind-blowing, 180 shift, but you have to start with the right mindset. And the other thing that kind of encapsulates that is Amazon is an all-in platform. You cannot go in, dipping your toe in the water and see how it does. You're just going to get devastated. You have to be 100% willing to provide the manpower, to provide the financial resources, the time and the energy resources, the infrastructure to be successful. And I'll give you, kind of the high level, what I call sort of the Amazon flywheel for a brand owner is optimize, launch, and analyze, right? So you have to start by optimizing those listings. Mindful Goods is an amazing company run by my friend Daniela Boltzmann, and they focus on done for you listing optimization. So if you're like, I don't have time to figure this out, you can just hire them. And they know how to do the best practices and staying within Amazon policy to create these amazing Amazon listings, right? The next strategy is launching, right? So you have to drive targeted traffic to that listing. A lot of that happens with advertising and SEO. It can also happen off Amazon using social media, video, paid ads, regardless. Any channel you use, customers are going to buy a product on Amazon. And then you take all those results and all that data and you analyze the results and say, okay, what's working? What's not working? What are customers understanding? What are they having trouble figuring out? We take that data, we put it back into optimization and back into the advertising part until we get full circle. And you get a really good flywheel that, can run really smoothly and grow. But you can just sort of begin to intuit how much work that requires to do that well, just for one product, let alone for your 120 line of products or more. Like, it's a substantial, and companies have to go in understanding you got to be all in. You can't do this halfway.
Yeah, so many things here. Again, not enough time. But at GS1 US, we're big on identify, capture, and share, right? Identification information, how do we capture it, barcode, RFID, and then how do we share it, right? And what's the importance within Amazon to have accurate data, right? Are there any gotchas specific to having or not having accurate data? Is it helping you move ahead, or is it not related right now? It's not an issue because there's other SEO things happening.
Yeah. So I always tell people Amazon isn't an e-commerce company. They're a data company, and they don't sell products. They sell convenience. And again, you think about framing things up. People buy a products that's $65 on Amazon that you can get in the store for $7.50, but they do it because they don't have to leave their house. And so there's an element where, or you can't get it in your area. So Amazon is a data company, and the more you leverage data, the more successful you'll be. Amazon does give sellers some data, everything from the number of sessions to their listings, which is how many Amazon customer visits a listing detail page in a 24-hour period, the unit session percentage, the conversion rate. They'll give you data on the most highly searched, I forget how many, but the most highly searched keywords on Amazon. Amazon will give you sort of data. They don't tell you how many people are searching those terms, but they rank those terms in order. So this is, last year it was like the number one was toilet paper and the second one was hand sanitizer, like the most highly ranked terms. And they do have a really cool thing called brand analytics that if you have a registered trademark and brand registry, you get access to sort of enhanced set of data of your customers and their demographics. So things like marital status, education level, income level, and some demographic data. So that can be really valuable. And we tell companies, you launch on Amazon and it all of a sudden opens more and more doors for you, right? So if you're a smaller emerging brand, if you want to get into retail, you actually start on Amazon because the retailers, they use the same Amazon tools that we do to look at your sales velocity and your product reviews. They won't even take a meeting with you if you're not on Amazon and you don't have qualified sales. At the same time, you can't be a larger brand and be in all these big box retailers and have Amazon, sort of fraught with unauthorized resellers who are just destroying your brand name with poorly packaged products, selling expired products, poor customer service. All of those things reflect your brand equity, customers' perceived expectation from your brand. And so you've got to jump on there. You've got to clean it up. You've got to monitor it. And that's why we always focus on launch, grow, and protect as the three key staples of successfully selling on Amazon.
Which is a great segue to my next question. I know you've worked with Michelle Covey from GS1 US on the single G10, and that was something that we created to help the small business get absolutely. A G10, which is a global trade item number, for $30. What's the response been to that from a seller community?
It's a good question. I'd probably ask you guys the same question. How many people have bought them? From my standpoint, like anything, it takes time to get the word out. And so somebody posted, there's still sort of a conversation happening in the community at large of, hey, do you need to buy actual GS1 G10s or UPC codes? And the answer is yes, 100%, because Amazon and GS1, as you guys obviously know, are working together to validate who owns those UPC codes. So even though you have these UPC code resellers saying, oh, it's 100% legal, you're like, that may be legal, but it doesn't mean it's going to work. Amazon's going to say, hey, you don't own this UPC code. And that's why I look at, from a brand perspective, having a website, e-commerce presence, social media, GS1 and a UPC code, that's the key foundation for success on Amazon, because all of those things are sort of the logistical foundational things to make it work. Amazon won't even allow you to list your product if you don't own the G10. It's kind of, and that's actually, I think, a good thing at this point in time. So I think it's going to take more and more time to get, for people like me to get the word out. But I think it's a relief that it's an opportunity. And GS1 has done such a great job over the last several years of making the G10s and UPC codes more and more accessible to smaller companies. Because two components. One is a lot of really small companies begin to make up a much bigger piece of the pie. And two, a lot of smaller companies, sole props and what have you, end up becoming those bigger companies. How do you help them when they get started so they can start out right? And, to kind of provide a last analogy of what I look at as Amazon success, there's three levels. And I use the analogy of launching a rocket. You start with building a foundation, right? That's all the infrastructure. That's your trademark, your brand registry, your GS1 UPC codes. It's all these logistics, the product specs, the images. Then you move to listing optimization. That's aiming the rocket, right? And if companies don't do it, it's like aiming a rocket sideways, and all it's going to do is horizontally fly across the horizon and never actually hit the moon that you're wanting to, get to. And the last piece is then launching the rocket, and that's driving that targeted traffic, that advertising piece. But it all starts with infrastructure. If you have no infrastructure, if you build a high-rise building without a solid foundation, the whole thing is just going to come down, and it's not going to be pretty when it does.
I'm really pleased with the analogy that you use there and kind of sharing this. You need the right foundation, and having a UPC, Universal Product Code, that's not registered to your name, right? You kind of borrowed it from somebody else. We've seen similar things happen in the trademarking industry where you kind of go the cheap route or the quick, easy route, and you got a trademark and it's legit. Problem is the product's already been trademarked 2 or 3 times beforehand. So now you're like fourth in line. So you really, you have a trademark, but it's not a valid one because you didn't have legal go through it and these other aspects. And I'm by no means a trademark expert, but I've heard some of the horror stories throughout. When you get into business, you don't know what you don't know sometimes. Yeah. And it seems like, Shannon, that's what you've gone through is this experience and learned it on your own. And then as you keep going through it's constantly changing. So like I said, we don't have enough time today, but let's get to like one more question before we get to the last questions to kind of wrap this up. And then, if we get some good feedback on this all, we can come back and double down. So as our listeners, please leave comments and we can focus in on some other areas. Absolutely. So the question I have for you is, as you do your consulting with new businesses versus established ones, right? Household names versus no one we know. What's the biggest piece of advice you want to drive home here? Or do you handle them totally differently, right? A net new business versus an established business, as we're talking about the focus here for Amazon.
So the biggest difference, and again, 90% of it is actually the same information. All those principles, they apply, regardless if it's a single seller or, like I said, a multinational company, a household name brand. So a lot of the education is exactly the same, which is why the Amazon Brand Success Academy can be used for, like I said, an inventor, or is actually used for in-house training for some of these larger companies. The piece I think that's different is you typically have the inventor or the emerging brand, they've got a good product, they're looking for traffic. So we really focus on SEO keyword research and advertising. And that's becoming a bigger and bigger part. Amazon just launched Amazon Live a couple of years ago. That's becoming a bigger and bigger thing, using Amazon affiliates and influencers to promote products live on video. It's a QVC shop at home model, except it's 1 click and 2 days away. So it's different. From the larger brand side, they typically have a very good understanding of branding and they've got a lot of traffic. What they don't have control of is the platform. And it typically means we're educating them on reseller policies, MAP policies, teaching them how to use a trademark in conjunction with a warranty to create an exclusive distribution model and agreement that allows them to actually legally kick off unauthorized resellers. So, a kind of, fun fact, but very, very vital for larger companies is if you have a trademark and a warranty program that allows you to offer an exclusive warranty that's only applicable to authorized sellers of your product. Now, all of a sudden, from the eyes of the law, from a court standpoint, it creates a material difference as if you and I were actually selling different products. So you're the unauthorized reseller, I'm the brand. From the consumer standpoint, it can look the exact same, but in the eyes of the law, it's a material difference. And that allows you to legally kick off unauthorized resellers because Amazon doesn't care. Amazon welcomes unauthorized resellers. They typically offer lower prices, but that does not create channel viability for the brands who are trying to maintain price parity across all their platforms. And so what you don't want to get into a situation is where Amazon is 90% of your revenue, because if anything happens, a bump in the road, you put all your eggs in one basket and they can shut you down, even if it was just an algorithm fluke. We've had companies get shut down because the wrong customer left a seller feedback on the wrong account. Right. That's all it takes, and it can take a month or 2 to get back up, and all of your revenue is basically frozen. So you have to consider those different parts, but the listing optimization, the advertising strategies, it's all pretty much the same. It's only how many products does this apply to, and how much money do you have behind it? That's basically it. Everything else is the same.
Wow. This is so intriguing and so interesting.
You can see I'm not passionate about this in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, totally behind the curtain here.
Yeah, it's crazy. And I know we have to wrap up, and I'll get to that question in a second. But for those of us who sit on this side of the computer and we just need the stuff on Amazon, right? The socks or the groceries or the whatever, you never notice that you're like, what do you mean it's not in stock for a day? Are you kidding me? You know, we've gotten so spoiled, but there's so much behind it. It's crazy. This has been amazing, and I could go on.
And I use Amazon as a consumer. I'm a Prime member. I ordered 15 things on it. My wife was gone this weekend. I ordered 15 things on Amazon just on my phone in 30 seconds each time. And I spent 40 minutes last night breaking down nothing but Amazon boxes to go out to the recycling this morning. But so as a consumer, I love it. As a seller and a company, a consultant that represents brands, it's just a more challenging side. It's just a different experience.
It's different.
It can make a huge, it can give you huge benefits and opportunities. I've got companies that are going to do a couple $1 million net revenue on Amazon. Amazon is sustaining and thriving their business. That's amazing. But it's not the same story for every company.
Yeah. It's not. And, the convenience factor, but, as we talked about, if the pandemic happened in the 80s, we'd all be sitting in a depression right now. But the digital commerce environment provides scale that we just haven't seen before. I mean, to think about getting up online and running a business, it just blows my mind. Whether it's Amazon or it's Shopify's, environment, or it's Walmart's environment, or it's Google's, or anybody else's marketplaces that are out there and websites, it's been game changing. And it's fundamentals of business aren't changing, like you talked about, Shannon, early on with what Ford did, but nuances are changing, and you have to adapt to them.
Well, it's what put Kodak out of business. And Simon Sinek has a great book out, and it's this whole idea of, the infinite game. Kodak had a just cause to help customers take easier pictures. They left digital on the shelf, which they invented, because they couldn't pivot the model of how they fulfilled that just cause. And so again, it's the same principle. We always have to adapt the technology, the methods, the models, but the principles and the just cause should stay the same.
All right, Liz, we got to wrap this up. We're running out of time.
Yep. Okay, so Shannon, this is one of the two questions that we ask at the end of each one of our podcasts. The first, what is your favorite technology that you're using right now?
So it's probably two, but I would say Loom, because I can make super fast videos. So I work with tons of clients and they're like, how do I do this on Amazon? Or I just need to explain something. So I hit record, I explain it, screen share video. And 2 seconds later, I've sent them the email. I don't have to edit. I don't have to cut. I don't have to do anything. Like it's made my life so much easier. And the second one is Calendly, because again, it's like, you just save so much time. I schedule out all my, available slots and times and how many appointments can be booked each day. And people can, I integrate with Stripe to be able to do paid consulting. Like it's so convenient. And it basically saves me from having to have, a full-time assistant to book and schedule all that stuff. So two favorite technologies that I'm using right now for sure.
And Loom is LOOM.com?
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Very cool. Familiar with the other one, not so much Loom, but so the other question we have, and we ask everyone this at the end, is just tell us something that along your journey in life that has just broken your brain, like just something that changed the way you look at the world, or you look at yourself, or your, technology, or an instance. And it could even be directly related to the work you're doing, in your consulting life.
So this has to do with more, I'm writing a book on innovation, and I watched the documentary Free Solo. I'm not sure if you guys saw it.
Yeah, seen it.
Amazing, documentary about Alex Honnold's Free Solo of El Capitan, 3,000 vertical cliff without a rope. And I just read the Impossible.
If you haven't seen it, folks, it's worth the watch. Even if you're not into climbing, it's worth the watch.
It's amazing. Yeah, National Geographic. And then I just finished reading The Impossible Climb by Mark Sinnott, who goes and takes you behind the scenes. What blows my mind is that he took a 3,000-foot vertical cliff that people thought was just impossible. And even himself, you look at it and you're like, it's freaking scary. Like that's his line. Yeah. He broke it down, every pitch, into sequences. He knew every hand hold, every thumb hold. He knew exactly how he would move his body. He journaled every single step of the way of a 3,000 foot journey. And then he would spend hours in his van visualizing, going through those motions and visualizing what happens if I get scared. What happens if it starts to rain? What happens if I get injured? I mean, what happens if I, all these, different scenarios, so that you don't have to think about it there. You've already visualized it to the point of comfort. And he said, you work through and you face through your fear in those just single instances. And the fact that he was able to take that insanely complex problem and break it down into this thumb hold, this foot hold, this pivot, and be able to execute what I think, is called one of the greatest, athletic achievements in history, which I wouldn't argue with. That to me blows my mind. And, again, for any entrepreneur, for anybody who's setting out to do anything that looks or seems impossible, you can break it down into bite-sized pieces and one finger hold, one hand hold at a time, climb a 3,000 foot vertical cliff without a rope. Wouldn't recommend it without the rope. That's up to you, but it's possible. It's possible, and he did it.
It blows my mind that you'd want to do it with a rope, all right? let alone without a rope.
I couldn't climb 3,000 feet of stairs in a week if you held a gun to my head.
Yeah.
So, but that kind of thing amazes me. People who are willing to do the impossible, and people who are willing to pursue that level of excellence, which is just passion plus precision. Every handhold had to be perfect or he would fall to his death. Yeah. And that to me just, it amazes and inspires me every day.
I really love the detail you got into that story. And I had no idea that our conversation would even go to Henry Ford and all this stuff. But I have a quote that I hang in my office, and it's been up there for about 15 years now. And it's from Henry Ford. It says, if you believe you can or can't, you're right.
Yeah.
And that story you just talked about was just, it's that whole mindset of, I'm going to do it. And I watched the movie, the documentary on it, and he didn't do it in a year. It took him a long time to get there. And he went out one day to do it and turned around and came back and didn't do it. So it's very cool. So to wrap us up here, there's so many great things. First off, some key bits that I garnered was Amazon's an all-in platform. It's a search engine first. Mm-hmm. There's no one silver bullet out there. You got to do 128 things right. Optimize, launch, and analyze. And this is a data company, not a product company, and they're all about convenience. And I will tell you, I've been there. I've seen this. The whole convenience thing, it's amazing where you used to go to Amazon to find cheap products, but now you go to Amazon first to find products. And to your point, people are selling them above margins now, out there, and we're seeing a lot of other cool things. So Shannon, I can't thank you enough for being on the show with us today. And hopefully we will talk to you again in the near future.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you guys so much both for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for joining the Next Level Supply Chain with GS1 US. If you enjoyed today's show, you can subscribe to our feed or explore more great episodes wherever you get your podcasts. Don't forget to share and follow us on social media. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.